imagine. He's a wife killer. That's part of the reason why they had to go to Germany, and also why the other women that he marries after that um, are unusual circumstances. Right? Now, to be fair, starting with Anne of Cleves, that was the one that ended up getting divorced, granted him that divorce, anything that he wanted, really. She began working on him to reaccept his two daughters, right? So Princess Mary is his firstborn living heir, but she's a girl, and that was from Catherine of Aragon. He disinherited her when he married Anne Boleyn. Anne Boleyn had Elizabeth, Princess Elizabeth, and when he killed Anne Boleyn, he disinherited Elizabeth as well. So his heir is only Edward. And although he is obviously the one that's going to take precedent, these two other girls are technically heirs to the throne as well. So Anne of Cleves kind of tries to bring them back into the fold and good graces with their father. And she's somewhat successful, and she's actually good friends with both of them. And then, Kitty Howard doesn't last too long, but Catherine Parr, which is wife number 6, she convinces him to reestablish them. So by the time Henry VIII dies, he does have 3 heirs again. He's got Edward, who's a young boy, he's got Princess Mary, and he's got Princess Elizabeth. So when he passes in 1547, Edward ascends the throne. But again, Edward is 12. So a young boy, and England is, like I said, it's only what Edward would be the 3rd generation Tudor. So very unstable as far as the power structure goes. And there's regents put in place for him, which are the Seymours, right, his mother's family, so that he can mature. But he is definitely the king in his own right. And he's very much a Protestant, right? And again, they changed their faith from Catholic to Protestant after the divorce of Catherine of Aragon and the marriage of Anne Boleyn. And this is really, really, really important for people of that time. They view that it is, they are the only ones who know the right way and everyone else is wrong. The idea that we have Christians today and we just kind of group them all together is definitely not how they viewed things. They would call Catholics papists, i.e. following the Pope. Catholics call Protestants heretics or blasphemers. So it was rife with religious fervor, religious zealotry, really. And so when Edward takes over again, he's a Protestant, and he continues his father's work, so to speak, in funding whatever monasteries and papists, that are in England, and he really does want to persecute them. He wants England to be an all Protestant nation, no Catholicism at all. 3 years later, however, he gets very ill. And Edward has always been sickly, but this time, even Edward knows that he's dying, right? He's 15 years old. He's very young, but he also realizes that after he dies, his sister, Princess Mary, will be taking the throne, that she is the next logical heir. But she's Catholic. And not only is she Catholic, she has a huge axe to grind about what Henry VIII and the Protestants did to her mother. So he actually tries to make provisions in his will to transfer power after he passes to a cousin named James Grey. I'm sorry, not James, Jane Grey. Okay, and there's lots of family ties behind all this, which are not that important for our purposes for this class. But Jane Grey did have, nobility and royal blood, so he tries to make her queen when he dies, so that Protestantism will continue. And poor Jane Grey, she was she was a lamb to the slaughter. She was queen for exactly 9 days after Edward passed, because the entire country rallied behind Mary. She was Henry VIII's first daughter. It's her time, right? So she takes over, and she is Queen Mary. She's crowned or coronated as Queen Mary, and is Catholic and moves everything back to Catholicism. So takes all the Protestantism out of the church, burns Bibles. Now, right question, why would you burn Bibles? At the time, Catholics believed that only clergy or learned scholars, theologians, or the Pope could read the Bible, and all the Bibles were written in Latin. And so you should look to your priests for guidance, that lay people should not, or everyday people should not read the Bible, and that they wouldn't understand it. It's above them. So you needed to turn to your clergy and monks and everything. And obviously that gives that group of people, the clergy, popes, a lot of power, right? And so when the Protestants took over, and we'll talk about the Protestant Reformation in a minute, they said, no, everyone should read the Bible. Your relationship is between you and God. So when Mary comes to the throne and takes everything back to Catholicism, she pulls all of that out of the churches. She reinstates the cathedrals. She tries to reestablish the monasteries and the convents where the monks and the nuns live. She is radical in her zealotism towards Catholicism. And like I said, she has a huge axe to grind with her father and the people that supported her father in divorcing her mother. They treated her very cruelly. They didn't take care of her after she was divorced. And they disinherited Mary. They, I mean, and then Mary, of course, says that King Henry VIII married that whore. That's what she calls Anne Boleyn till the day she dies. And is trying to kind of it's trying to even the score, so to speak. And she takes it out on Protestants. She earns the nickname Bloody Mary because she burns Protestants alive. As she institutes basically like the English Inquisition, she gives Jesuit priests the right to go through and root out any pockets of Protestantism, anybody who's secretly practicing the Church of England, and they torture them and or kill them, right? And her preferred method is either beheading or burning, right? Burning alive. Now, burning at the stake is usually reserved for witches and warlocks, right? But heretics will do, right? That is also, according to her, a fitting punishment for heretics, which she considers any Protestant a heretic. And so Mary is kind of on this crusade to what she considers cleanse her nation of heretics, Protestants. But Mary is older, right? When she ascends the throne, she's in her early 30s. And she quickly marries Philip, the King of Spain. So they are distant cousins, as you can imagine. His mother and her mother were siblings, right? Actually, no, I'm sorry. His grandmother and Mary's mother were siblings. So there's a couple generations there, but either way, that's a little close. But they get married. They're Catholic. This is a huge Catholic alliance. And King Philip comes and stays, a couple of months out of the year. They try to make this work. Obviously, this is a long relationship, utmost proportions, as she's the queen of one country and he's the king of another. And she's desperately, trying to start a family. Because the issue is that if she does not have children, her sister Elizabeth will take the throne after her, and she's a Protestant, right? Queen Mary actually throws Elizabeth in jail twice, I want to say, on suspicion of plotting to have her assassinated, which there's no evidence that Elizabeth ever did that. But Mary does protect Elizabeth a lot. Mary helped bring Elizabeth up. She was took care of her as a baby and also as a young girl. So Mary and Elizabeth have a complicated relationship. There was a lot of people in Mary's inner circle that said she should kill Elizabeth. because she's a threat. So Mary didn't do that. And when I say she threw her in jail, she put her in the tower in royal quarters. So she was just made to stay. It was like house arrest, right? And a very nice house arrest. So we have that. But Mary believes that she's pregnant about 3 years into her reign. Her belly does start to swell, the bleeding stops, and so all the signs look like she is pregnant. Unfortunately, it is not to be. And she goes into confinement, which is in the 16th century what women would do when they were close to their time, and they would spend about 6 weeks kind of locked away. They would have the baby, and then they would kind of the postpartum. They would stay confined for their safety, for the baby's safety and health, and then come out, and they would go to church and be christened and cleansed, and then they could re-enter society, so to speak. So Mary confinement, thinking she's having a baby. There's no baby. It never comes. They think that they called it a phantom pregnancy. Her belly goes down, and eventually it's not swollen anymore at all. And obviously there's no birth. So at the time they say, well, that's a phantom pregnancy. This happens to her again later on. And she puts on a strong face and say, oh yeah, I'm pregnant, and they've assured me I have a child. But again, 16th century medicine. But she knew, and some other very close courtiers knew that this was impossible. Philip had not been in the country for 2 years. So there was really no way. But, oh yeah, I'm pregnant. And this time she didn't go into confinement, and they figured out that she actually had ovarian cancer or uterine cancer, and she was swelling up because of the cancer. She had a lot of tumors. So she never did end up getting, she was never pregnant. She never had a child, which was pretty sad. And it was the cancer that killed her, because she only lasted 8 years on the throne, which is relatively short. Can you all hear me? I said my connection was low.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yes.
So, awesome. So she dies. And Philip obviously goes back to Spain. He's on the market again. And who inherits but Princess Elizabeth? She is now Elizabeth I, and she has an amazing reign. Up until probably the current queen, she was one of the longest reigning monarchs. She lives a really long time. She's a good queen by all accounts. She does change the religion back to Protestantism, becomes the head of the Church of England, as they call it. Anglicans is another word for that. People who are Americans that follow the Church of England are Anglicans. And she preaches tolerance, really. She is done with this religious back and forth, and she says, basically, you need to be a part of the Church of England, but I'm not going to persecute you. I'm not going to come into your home and try and root you out and find out if you are still worshiping the Pope or whatnot. Religiously, the state religion is the Church of England. We're Protestant, but it's kind of one of those don't ask, don't tell type of things. I'm not going to persecute you as a Catholic. So this actually does not go over well with her advisors, but she does it anyway, and it's very smart, and she has a very long reign. Now there are some famous Jesuit priests who attempt to assassinate the queen. So the entire time, right, she has to have a lot of security forces for that. But she kind of proves them wrong that women can rule England, they can rule Britain, and they can do a very good job at that. Under Elizabeth is when you have the golden age, the Elizabethan era comes from her. Shakespeare is during her time. He writes his plays for her. She's a patron of the arts. You see a flowering of universities and knowledge and government funded social welfare systems, not as intricate as there are today, but um, she does things for society, for the poor. She supports the art. She just she's interested in exploration. So that's where she kind of ties into getting to Jamestown. Now, the big question after she ascends the throne is, who is she going to marry, right? Because she's surrounded by men, and she's surrounded by old men most of the time, right? Advisors, her general counsel, right? There are no women in these positions of power. It's only her. And so, of course, they want her to get married, but they want to be able to pick, it's a political decision on who she's going to marry. And they understand that whomever she marries will become king. And so they've got to pick carefully because a king will always outrank her, even though she is of the blood. She is the queen by her own right. So there are a lot of suitors, right, which are people who want to marry her, pushed in front of her. King Philip of Spain wants to marry her. Uh, keep it in the family, I guess. And she is not impressed with Philip. In fact, she didn't care for him too much when her sister was married to her, and she certainly does not look kindly on him trying to court her when her sister just died, right? And he's Catholic, and he's from Spain. So she's against that match completely. Although he continues to try and come to terms with her and marry her because he wants to continue the alliance he had when his wife was Queen of England. And so she continues to reject him, and this will become a problem in a minute. But there are several people, like I said, that she entertains for a while, but overall, she finally says, "No, I'm not getting married." She shocks them all, right? Because everyone was like, "What, you're going to become a spinster and not have children? How could you? How unwomanly of you!" But she rules over them, and she says, basically, "I'm married to England, and I'm not giving up my power." Not to somebody who isn't of my father's lineage, and definitely not to somebody who isn't of my faith. And so she comes out and says, "I'm not going to get married. All right, I'm going to rule by myself," which at the time was very controversial, obviously, because she's a woman. But she outranked everybody, so she did what she wanted. And so then we get to the Elizabethan era um, and exploration. But let me pull up the slide real quick. I'll share my screen with you in just a second um, of Protestant Reformation. Let's see, share screen. Okay. So this is happens in 1516 is really when it kicks off. That's a picture of Martin Luther, not to be confused with Martin Luther King, senior or junior. But it is, according to Martin Luther King's family, kind of where they get the name from. Martin Luther is a theologian. He's a monk and a teacher, a professor, and he teaches at the University of Wittenberg in Germany. And he was annoyed, all right, or perturbed by the corruption that he was seeing amongst the clergy. So he taught very strict. I mean, like I said, he had spent his entire life learning the Bible, learning the dogma, learning all of the literature, right, that the Catholic Church put out. He was a Catholic for sure, but he was, as I said, annoyed by that, and he begins to question some of the practices of the church. Okay, and he happens to be the Pope at the time happens to be a Borgia, and a very corrupt one. I mean, extremely corrupt. Uh, the first thing that Martin Luther was upset about was that priests and bishops, clergy that enter the church, are required to vow a celibacy. What does that mean? Celibacy. Nobody knows? Let's see here. Chat. What is a vow of celibacy? Can y'all hear me?
In and out.
You can hear me? Okay, I just want to make sure it's okay. Okay. Okay, so a vow of celibacy means that you vow to never have sex, period. Um, and so let me check again. I'm hearing people come up on the very early, breaking up. Okay, let me turn up the volume. Sorry. And okay, is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, I turned up the volume. Okay, so a vow of celibacy is that you're not going to have sex, right? You vow to be celibate. And so what's happening during this time is that you have priests and clergy that take these vows and then go on to have mistresses. And these bishops and priests, they're supported by the communities in which they live. So, they're getting paid sort of to do this. They basically have their house provided, their meals, et cetera, and they're not necessarily getting married, but they're living out of wedlock with these women and having families, 5 and 6 children, right? And the community is expected to provide for them. And so he's saying this is not a good deal. Like you can't do this. This is corrupt. This is you're being a hypocrite, right? And the other things that he was against were the people not being able to read the Bible. He said people should be able to read the Bible. It says that it's the word of God. People should be able to do that. And he says that people should still go to their priests and confess, but they should also have an understanding of what their sins are, etc. And you get that from the Word of God. So he writes something called the 95 Theses, which are based on 95 criticisms of what he sees as things that need to be reformed within the Catholic Church. And he nails them to the church message board, basically, in Germany, in Wittenberg. And again, that's where you find all of your information. As a community, it's like our Blackboard. It's how you put information out, how people what's going on. So he puts this out, and people begin reading it. And of course, he writes it in German so people can read it. And what he really wanted was reforms in the Catholic Church. He did not begin with the outset of, I'm going to change the religion, we're going to start the Protestant Reformation. He never wanted to do that. His goal was really to reform the church. However, the Pope thought as he was very threatened. He saw it as a rebuke to his power, and was extremely upset, did not see the need for reform, and threatened to excommunicate him unless he recanted, which means take it back, right? Then the same Pope says he wants to build a magnificent basilica or big cathedral, right, where the Pope is going to live and where they'll get religious services, right? Because apparently, according to this Pope, there wasn't enough fancy churches in Rome. But of course, he wants to make his own mark, right? So he wants to build, and he ends up building St. Peter's Basilica, which is, infamous as the seat of the Vatican. But he has no money lying around. He's got a lot of money, but not the kind of money it's going to take to build it. So they begin selling indulgences. And basically it says, if you have committed a sin in which you would go to hell for, or at least purgatory. Go to your priest, you confess sin, you pay a fee, and the priest will write you out an indulgence, what they call an indulgence. And he'll give you penance to do, but basically, people are paying their way out of hell, is what an indulgence is. So that's not in the Bible. Definitely not in the Bible. Definitely not how it works. But this is how he's funding this huge building project. So Martin Luther has a problem with that. Huge problem. That's kind of what we would call the straw that broke the camel's back. He says absolutely not. This is totally against all church teachings, and he would know because he studied this, and we should not be allowing this to go on. So he does not back down. The Pope is incredibly upset and not only excommunicates him from the Catholic faith, meaning he will go to hell in their belief, and put a price on it, right? So the popes, especially in this time period, are not what consider your typical holy men. But so they put a bounty out on Martin Luther's head. There are Jesuit priests and mercenaries hired by the Pope to kill this man because of him questioning the Pope's authority in his mind, and also because of the information that he's putting out. Because that's the thing. You can kill a man, but you can't kill his ideas. So we see that Martin Luther has to go into hiding, and he's hidden by several princes, royalty in Germany, so that he is not killed by the Pope. And his writings and his teachings create this kind of branch off of Catholicism or Christian into Protestantism. And the base word of that is to protest, right? Protestants protest. And so what this develops into is this belief that followers should be able to read the Bible. Followers have their own relationship with God. You don't need to go through a corrupt priest or bishop or the Pope to God. That's between you and him. You should still confess your sins but confess them to God. And it just kind of evolves. And then you have people pick up on this idea like John Calvin and Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn. Now they use it for a political purpose, but it serves their needs, so to speak. So what becomes of this Protestant Reformation is you begin to see large mass printings of the Bible. And so when we see the first printing press come out in Germany, the Gutenberg press, the first thing they print is the Bible, right? It's one of the most widely bought printed books even in the world today. So they begin printing in all the languages, right? Latin at the time and even now, it's a dead language. So nobody really reads Latin except if you are in the clergy or maybe the medical field because of all of the terminology. So they begin printing the Bible in English, in Spanish, in French, German, right? In all the languages, and of course, Christianity takes off. But if you read the Bible, you realize nowhere in there does it say I have to pay the Pope or I have to I can buy my way out of hell, right? That's definitely not in there. So this is starting to take off and grow. Now, to kind of as in general, we have to understand that all these people, Catholics and Protestants, Eastern Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, are all Christians. So Christian is a very broad term, and it just means that you believe that Jesus Christ is the Messiah and has come back to basically and died for your sins, right, and became the Savior. So that is the basic tenet for all Christians. Then you kind of break off and you have people who literally interpret the Bible, people who interpret it a little differently. And again, you have Eastern, Russian, and Greek Orthodox, and they do things differently. than, say, Catholicism or Protestantism. And in Protestant, then you're going to break down to the Puritans, the Methodists, the Anglicans, the Presbyterians, right? All of these Baptists fall under that Protestant category. So, kind of to go back to our story about Henry VIII, the reason why England is so late to the table, so to speak, as far as exploration, is because they are busy trying to figure out what religion they are. Right? So you go from Catholic to Protestant with Anne Boleyn, then Edward dies and you go back to Catholicism because of Catherine's daughter Mary, and then she dies 8 years later and you go back to Protestantism. So back and forth and back and forth. Not only do the people, are they getting whiplash, right? But the money, there's a lot of money going back and forth with this, trying to either rebuild monasteries or take that money away. Wars are expensive. Henry VIII spends money like water, right? So by the time Elizabeth becomes queen, she does not have a lot of money. She does not have a lot of money. The treasury's almost there. The country is reeling from all of these switches back and forth with religion. So while she and England, right, are going through all of this, Henry VIII doesn't die till 1547. Spain and Portugal have been stealing and making tons and tons of money off of the New World. So how do we get to that part? How do we get Elizabeth and the English to North America? Well, Elizabeth and the French, as we said before, they do not do colonization like the Spanish and Portuguese. What they do is they give letters of marque, or they give people the licenses to be a privateer, right? Which we said before is basically just a license to pirate. And Sir Walter Raleigh is one of these guys, and he says, if we go to the New World, I want to go to the New World. I want to take this this with me, but in the English form, they provide private companies or private individuals provide all of the money, so the crown doesn't have to pay for it, which is good because she can't pay for it anyway. Right? But she gives them the license to do so in case they come into contact with the Spanish or other European nations out and about. And any land that he finds, he will claim for her, for the crown. And as long as he pays a small tax on anything he brings in, he can keep it. Right? So it is not crown run colonization, but it is crown sponsored. Okay, she does allow him and sends him in to do that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share screen in just a minute, and I'll bring you up to chapter 2. So Sir Walter Raleigh's first attempt is unsuccessful. Okay, but let me go back here. So Sir Walter Raleigh takes a group of people. We're talking 119, 120 people, I want to say, and they agree to go to the New World and try and set up a fort. And again, they're in search of riches. So he sails to the northern part of the continent, right? He's not trying to go to South America or the Caribbean or anything, because that's where the Spanish are, Spanish than Portuguese. So he actually lands closer to the Carolinas, right? And there's an island there, Oak Island, but there's also they set up camp at a place called Roanoke. And so Roanoke, right? We've got about 120 people or so, and they build a fort while he's there, brings him there, sets him up with provisions, then goes and actually buries more provisions instead in case of emergency. Here's the extra stuff, right? God be with you. I'll be back next year, basically, right? He's going to go home and get more stuff. He stays for about 6 months, and he takes off, and he says, I will be back. And he leaves them there in the year 1587. And for the beginning, they're doing really well. They're setting up their hunting and setting up their fort, and they're doing okay. But bad things are afoot. In 1588, the very next year, the Spanish Armada invades England, or comes for England, we should say. This for a couple of reasons. Number one, Philip is dejected because Elizabeth won't marry him, and number two, because he wants England and he wants to turn it back to Catholic. So he has the support of the Pope. Um, so Elizabeth designs a very strong force coming, and he builds a huge fleet of ships. Philip does. So he sends these all to Great Britain. Um, Obviously, their spies know it's coming, and Elizabeth says nobody, sailor, privateer, pirate, anybody, nobody can leave. Everybody is enlisted to protect the homeland because if she falls, it doesn't matter what colonies you have. Right. So he's enlisted, and what we actually see is they defeat the Spanish Armada through luck and weather and everything else, right? They use fire ships. Some ships get blown off course, and you have Spaniards that land in Northern Ireland and give route to a group of people they call the Black Irish, right? So there's a lot of kind of mishaps that go on with this. But for our purposes, Sir Walter Raleigh is stuck in Britain for 3 years. He cannot go back to Roanoke. So they're on their own. And throughout those 3 years, something happens. Something, either they run out of livestock or their harvest went bad. We're not sure what happened, because when he comes back, right, 3 years later, it's been abandoned. There's nobody there. All the provisions that he hid have been taken. There's no signs of fire. There's no signs of a fight. There's no slaughter. There's no destroyed property. Nothing. There's just nobody, right? But when he walks up to the fort, on the side of the fort, or on the side of the gate, is this word that's etched into a log that says Croatoan. And that's it. That's the only evidence. So the big mystery is, where did these people go? And we don't know. There is no proof, right? As historians, I tend to believe that they went to the Native American tribe that was local to them, whose name happens to be one, uh, and immersed themselves with them. And in a sense, what they went native. They went and lived with Native American. I think they could make it there on their own. They were unable to flag down any ships because they had built this fort on a sandbar. Ships couldn't get in there very easily, and nobody saw them because they were well protected. They built it that way on purpose. They thought that that was a good idea, that the Spanish wouldn't see them, and I think they ran out of food. And I think they got really desperate, and they went and traded with the Native American tribe, and the Native American tribe took them in. Some evidence of that is the fact that the next generation of said Native Americans had a lot of lighter skinned, light haired, light eyed children in it. So, and most historians agree that that is probably what happened to that group of people. So the first expedition, the first colony in the New World for the English, was very unsuccessful, right? But Sir Walter Raleigh doesn't give up, and he tries again. But this time, he's going to need some more money. And the way that the British and the French do it, they create what they call joint stock companies. And joint stock companies are a group of investors that come together to sponsor a colonization attempt, or later on to sponsor the business venture that erupts out of that colonization. So when you do this, you become a partner. So you have 10 wealthy investors, and they all put in 10,000 pounds, and then you have 100,000 pounds to deal with. If it fails, your investor is only out 10,000 pounds, not the whole 100,000, right? So it's a lower risk investment. And so using this, they create They call it the London Company, and he tries again, and this time he lands in Virginia. At the time, right? That's not the name of what the Native Americans called it, but he names it Virginia for the quote Virgin Queen of England, um, and founds the settlement of Jamestown. So let me pull up the PowerPoint here for you to see. We'll start here. Founding of Virginia. So you have economic and religious motives, but it's mostly economic. Virginia is all about the money. It's a business venture. They're there to make money. And the people that they send, the people that come, they're all men, right? All men. Most of these men are middle class and or wealthier. And the thing is, they come over here with this idea in their mind that this is going to get them rich quick. They're looking for a get rich quick scheme, and that is not how it turns out for them. There are no more Aztec empires. There are no more large pots of gold. Unfortunately, they suffer for that. Advantages versus disadvantages. So they do come in contact with the Native American tribe, the Powhatans, that want to utilize trading with the Europeans, as I said, to give them an edge up on their enemies. Disadvantages, because they send mostly men and men who have very little tangible skills, they have a very hard time. And in fact, we'll kind of talk about that with the Freethorn letter. I'll explain that to you probably next week. But they don't have blacksmith. They don't have anybody who clothes or clothes. They have a hard time cooking, cleaning, and finding food for themselves because these are businessmen. They are not laborers. They are not artisans. Um, the Virginia Company founds Jamestown in 1607. It is the Virginia Company is originally founded in 1606, and then they found the town of Jamestown in 1607. And like I said, originally, they managed to kind of scrape along for a while, and people are figuring out that there's no gold there. They keep asking the natives and keep asking the natives, where's the gold? Where's the gold? And they're like, there is no gold, right? You can ask me as much as you want, but there's no gold here. And then, so they waste a lot of their original, their time there up front looking for gold. They don't build shelter for the winter. They don't stock up food. And as you know, where they're located in Virginia, it's very cold in the winter. They're not provisions. They're not building shelter. They're not making clothes. They're not doing any of the things they need to take care of themselves throughout the winter, right? And eventually the food that they brought is going to run out. And they can hunt, but let's hope they're better with a rifle than they are with a shovel, we'll say. So we have initially some issues. Jamestown is founded similar to this here, right? And what I will do is this graphic is going to come into play quite a bit as we go through the issues that Jamestown has. So you have this village in the center, right? And the original settlers are going to live in the village or that first kind of light blue ring where we would consider them wealthy. Now, from 1607 to 1620, they call this the starving time because people are dying of lack of food. So again, the Powhatan tribe does agree to trade with them and begins teaching them how to grow food. But some of these original immigrants are so stuck on this gold fever that they aren't paying enough attention. They're not doing what they need to be doing. So as begin to see John Smith and General start to lobby for families. They're like, we need families to come over. We need women to come over. We need, people with skills to come over. So it's very slow. They kind of have to find out these things the hard way, and they begin to bring in more people that can actually have skills. And they bring farmers and laborers and stuff. Again, we're still talking about laborers. We're not talking about free labor, we should say. We're talking about laborers who are there by their own will, not slaves, not indentured servants yet. Okay, and so they are advertising Jamestown, the Virginia company is advertising Jamestown as this great opportunity. They're not, it is the original propaganda, if you will, and so they're not telling the whole story. And so people are coming thinking that everything is great, everything is hunky-dory, not understanding that these people are starving, right? And we start to see some documents that prove that the company's not telling the truth, right? And that one of those documents is the Richard Freethorn letter. So again, I'm going to post it. I think it's already in the packet for document analysis, but I'll post it separately, and that will go along with the video about how to do the document analysis. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the lecture part for today, because we need to do a quote discussion. We need to have you answer this real quick. Please make sure that you have put your name in the chat, for attendance purposes. And let me send out this poll for you real quick. All right. Sorry, I'm still working on your poll, and I'll send it out real quick. Again, this is going to count for your. Can you all see the poll? This is going to count for your discussion grade. Here we go. Yep, here we go. Y'all are responding. Okay, once you all have put your name in the chat and you answer the poll, you can sign off if you want, or if you have a question, you can wait for me. But we're pretty much done for today, so have a great weekend, and I'll see you Monday.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
You as well.
Does the poll go to you?
Yes.
Will you submit it, or you just taking a poll just to take?
No, you got to submit it, and then that'll be your grade for the online discussion.
Does it say submit, or you just click it and it does it itself?
I think it does it itself.
Will you post them later?
Post
Like
what later?
the poll, like which one was the right one? I believe I picked the right one.
Yeah, yeah. We can talk about it Monday.
All right. You have a blessed
Okay.
one.
You too.
All right.
I'm clicking it, but it didn't say it's submitted or anything. It's just like